Thank you so much for joining. Please tell us where you're joining from. We always love to hear that. I am in the ATL. Anybody else in ATL? And Karen, welcome.
Hello. I am also in the A.
Yes.
Summertime in the A is upon us now.
But she's a Philly girl. So definitely post in the comments. Let us know where you're joining from. We always love to hear those locations, particularly the international locations. I think we had Dubai last time. That was real exciting. So we got Miami. Anthony's here from Miami. Welcome. Who else? Ooh, Decatur. We've got the deck in the house. Thanks, Felix. And Berkeley, California. Hey, Susan. NYC. Hey, Kevin. Thanks so much for your support online, Kevin. So yeah, definitely keep letting us know where you're joining from. We've got Jackson, Mississippi. So yeah, keep letting us know. Let me just dive right in because our time is a little shorter today. First, I want to start off with some amazing news and a little bit of a selfish plug, but it's a little bit of a gift as well. I'm going to post in the comments a link to my brand new LinkedIn Learning course, which is now live, which is now available for everyone. It is called Supporting Allyship and Anti-Racism at Work. So I'm so excited. I put so much time and energy into this course. You can access the course for free for 24 hours from the time that you click the link that is in the comments. So from the time you click that link, it should be available for free, the entire course. It's about 45 minutes. It is chock full of specific tips and techniques. If you're saying, well, how can I make a difference? What can I do? Very, very specific tips and suggestions for what you can do wherever you are in the food chain, wherever you are in the organization. So really excited and proud of that course. Please share it with others. And if you have a problem with the link, I think maybe the link was too long. Just message me on LinkedIn and I can send you the link. And so thanks, Karen, for coming back. All right, so let's dive in. And again, before I do that, I have to acknowledge the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. Just absolutely horrendous what happened. And what's more horrendous is that most of us don't know about it. Most of us didn't know about it. So I encourage you to learn about it. I watched the Vox video on it this morning, and I think this is just another example of how the reparations conversation goes so wrong. You know, there's a reason why when people talk about reparations, they always want to go back to slavery. They always want to talk about 200 and 300 years ago. And certainly there should be reparations, and certainly there should be some sort of remuneration. And that was horrible and horrific. But that's not the only horrific thing that happened. That's not our most recent oppression. They go back to slavery. You know, ask yourself, why don't we talk about reparations for Jim Crow? You know, why don't we talk about that? You know why? Because those people are alive right now. That's why we don't want to talk about it. You know, we'd rather pick something 200 and 300 years ago and say, oh, those people are dead. There's no way we could address that because those people are long gone. Well, guess what? Jim Crow was more recent. Tulsa was more recent. Those people themselves are not only alive, but their direct descendants are alive. So
and also Tulsa isn't the only one. That's just 100 years. So we have to know that this has happened, and that's why African Americans have been unable to increase wealth and have generational wealth, is because we're always starting from scratch. But
when you talk about generational wealth, I mean the housing discrimination, the Fair Housing Act, that was 1968. How many people do you think are alive now that lost money or were discriminated against through unfair housing, through redlining, through buying houses on contract? That's not, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. That's present day. Those are my parents, okay? Those are anybody who was born before the 1960s. They were born into the Jim Crow laws that were pervasive throughout this country. So I think that's such an important topic. We probably need to have another session just talking about reparations, because I know that topic comes up in the workplace sometimes, and you need to have language for that. So with that, let's just launch into our topic for today. which is the dangers of corporate tokenism. And before we get too far, first, I kind of want to define it. I want to unpack that. When we say corporate tokenism, this is what we're talking about. Unfortunately, too often what happens is that something happens in the news, in the media, something that's horrific, and corporations are like, oh my God, we got to do something. We're too white. We don't have any Black people on the board. We don't have any Black people in senior leadership. And instead of really digging in and asking the question, well, why don't we have any Black people in our leadership team or on the board? And what can we do to structurally fix that? And that's what I talk about in my course. So please check out my course on LinkedIn Learning. Instead of doing that, you know what they do? They say, well, let's find a couple chocolate chips and let's throw them on the board, or let's throw them in leadership so we can kind of check the box and say we're done. And so that's what we mean by corporate tokenism. And it happens all the time. And it's so dangerous. It's so injurious. In many ways, I would make the argument companies are worse off by doing that than they would be if they did not do that. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit later with my own personal example. So that's what we mean when we talk about corporate tokenism. It's, instead of fundamentally trying to figure out how can we build a much more inclusive workplace, a much more inclusive environment, we find one or two tokens, and those tokens are supposed to represent every LGBT person or every Black person or every woman or every young person, whatever the area of identity might be. So now that we understand what it is, let's talk about a few examples. Let's talk through why it's so dangerous. And Karen, I really want to start with you. For those, who don't know, Karen, she is an actress. She's acted in lots of events and shows and films that you probably know. And so I want to ask you, as an actress, as someone who's prominent in the media, how have you seen tokenism show up? And then what is the danger of that? What's wrong with that? It's like you said, you don't have enough Black people. We put some Black people in there. Like, right. What's wrong with that?
Well, there's a number of ways that it plays out. There's so many different ways. I think in the last 2 to 5 years, we've seen things expand as a result of streaming. We've seen stories told. We're seeing a lot more diverse stories that includes color, gender identity. It's a number of these different stories that are told and are now told from an authentic place. So where we've had up until this time, if you look at the numbers, it's still primarily white males that are making decisions, that are hiring everyone, that are putting everything in place. Even if it's an entire a show filled with Black faces, Black or brown faces, it's still primarily white people making decisions and writing the words. And since the media is the main place that if we are not exposed in our personal lives to people of different backgrounds, the media is the only place we get exposed to other people. So if those things are visual only, but not authentic, that's problematic because it reinstills stereotypes. It reinstills a lot of these things. I want to make one point off of what you were saying about corporate tokenism, though. The reverse problem that happens is that when it's not tokenism and someone is hired on their merits, people assume they were just hired as a token and then don't give them the respect due for their accomplishments and their achievements. And I think a number of us have had to deal with that. Well, you only got that because you're Black, because you're a Black female. No, I got it because I'm the smartest person in the room.
Right. Exactly. And just because it's overdue, I mean, I think Meghan McCain really stepped in it, a few weeks ago, where she said something like, well, after the anti-Asian the Asian incidents happen and were so publicized. And she said, we don't have an Asian person. So does that mean one of us should be fired? Does that mean a less qualified? I don't remember the exact wording, but the implication was that if they did bring on an Asian person, or that somehow that person wouldn't be as qualified. Right. And that's unfortunate, because just because we've been overlooked for so long, that doesn't mean that as soon as they decide to put somebody there, that person is not qualified or that they're less qualified.
That there weren't qualified people in the past.
Of course, all the time, right? Like, that's what I mean, overlooked for years.
We're just finding women. We're just finding this. Oh, wow, this is great. No, you're just now listening. And I think when we talked offline about this, what's the problem of tokenism? It's because the difference in, when we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're missing the I. You know what I mean? We're getting the D, but we're missing the I, and the I is inclusive. It means we're including you in the discussion. We're listening to what you're saying. We understand that we have been functioning with blind spots, that we are missing out on the entire conversation. So we're bringing you here to make sure that we don't continue this practice. The problem is that people just kind of want you there. And right. Then if it's just you, you're like,
you don't have any real power. You're window dressing. They're window dressing. Right, it's like they put you in there. Now smile and do what we say.
Be happy that you're here.
Yeah.
Be happy that we let you here.
And let me just underscore what you said. So many DEI practitioners say, if you would just focus on the inclusion, you'll get the diversity. You don't have to worry about it. And that's where they have it opposite. And that's why so many organizations are starting to say I and D instead of D and I. They're trying to say lead with the inclusion. If you will focus on the inclusion, the diversity will come. But the mistake that they make, it's easier to just cherry pick a couple people, and let's not also get to, sometimes they're very careful and strategic with who they pick. Mm-hmm. They might have somebody who's more assertive, who will speak the truth. And they don't like that. So they're not going to pick that black person. They're going to pick the black person who's not going to say anything. Right. They're going to pick the black person who is going to go along with whatever they're going to say. And see, also as black people, we can see that too. So that, that's problematic when you pick someone who clearly is not necessarily representative of the views of that group. I mean, there's so many reasons why this is dangerous. And going back to the media, just one thing I wanted to say before we move on to other topics is it's really interesting to me as a viewer of media, of what our lens is like. Like, for example, I think that it's very, very common. I mean, you can certainly correct me, where they might sprinkle a couple chocolate chips in the show. They might throw in one or two because they don't want to have an all white cast. They know they're gonna have a problem if they have an all white cast. So it's like Friends 2.0.
But then they'll cast a black person and an Asian person as a couple, but they'll still have 4 different white couples. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we still, or they'll have the black person or the Asian person or Latino also be gay. Like, okay, well, let's just throw all of
with that one person. I need to check like 3 or 4 boxes. Yeah, I need you to be black, Asian. Right. I need you to be gay. I need you to be everything. Right. But I mean, let's just state the obvious. I mean, what's happened for years and years is those people are there in extremely minor roles. They're always the friend. Like I was joking with you before that, Sex and the City is doing a reboot. And I'm like, somehow I think they might find a black person this time. And I love Sex and the City. Hudson. Yeah, they did. They did. Things were changing. So, we see them in the very minor roles. And then the other thing I thought was interesting is anytime there are more than, say, 2 or 3 black people in the cast, automatically is now a black show.
Black show.
It can't be a regular show. It's like if you got more than 2 black people, now it's a black show versus
still written by white men, a room full of white men. And then when you talk about like writers' rooms, depending on how big the show is or whatever, there could be 10 or 20 people writing for this show, and 2 or 3 of them are black, and then you have to fight. No, this is what it. No, it doesn't seem right. I don't know anybody like that. That's why I'm here. You know what I mean? It's like. And I've had that so many times where, recently I did a writing project and they literally brought me on because they're like, we can't write about this and it be all white people. So we definitely want to have someone that knows. And it's like, great, but then there'll be certain times where like, I'll put in information, but in the editing process, what makes it make sense is lost.
Exactly. We're bringing you in for your difference. But then we're going to still overrule because we think we know better.
Yeah, because, I like the way it plays, but that's not how it would happen. That's not accurate. Well, it looks fine. Like, and so that's where you trying to tell me what I'm saying is off because of your perception, and I live this life. And
right,
that
exactly.
is infuriating.
And that's the difference. It's like the diversity is having you sitting there, but you're not included. And so it just kind of erases the diversity. And now you've got a bad taste in your mouth about that whole experience.
So we have to talk about, though, because it's always, all these conversations are about allyship. And, and the cousin of corporate tokenism is performative allyship.
Sure, absolutely.
And that could be a whole nother topic about performative allyship, and that it's not authentic. It's not doing anything to really help the cause. The focus needs to be, if you are wondering if you're being performative versus actually helping, is it about how you feel, or is it about the problem? You know what I mean? Keep going back to how am I feeling? If this is about including Black and brown voices, Asian voices, LGBTQ voices, if it's about that, then how are they feeling? Are they feeling like they're being hurt? And if you're in a situation where this is the only person, what are you doing to lift them up and to give them a megaphone? Hey, what was Dana saying about? Dana said something about this. Did you, Dana, what do you think about this?
Wonderful tip. And let me just also add, it's not about feelings, it's about outcomes also. How are the outcomes changing? We need to focus less on feelings and more on outcomes. But absolutely, Karen, I want that to be a great takeaway. If you're an ally, you're in the room, redirect that conversation. If you feel like this person was ignored or glossed over or minimized in any way, let's redirect. Let's listen a little bit more to what Karen had to say. And that makes a huge change.
And let me also caution, because all of these conversations, you have to build up some type of rapport with someone,
relationship, yes.
Because the flip side of that, which is a really inauthentic place, is whenever something Black is up and somebody wants to know my opinion. You know what I mean? I'm not here for you to Google my thoughts. I'm here for, when I'm speaking, you making sure that I'm being heard.
And that's where the tokenism comes in. You're not the token representative for anything female, for anything Black, for anything from Philly, whatever it is, you shouldn't be, that's not your responsibility to bear 100%, but we're celebrating, that you can bring that. Let me
go ahead. And let me just say this. I don't know everything about all Black people, but I know more than you. You know what I mean? Like, I know more than you all. So even though I don't know everything about Black people everywhere in the world, in my state, in my city, at Spelman College, I still know more than you do with your one biracial nephew or niece. You know what I mean? Like, I still am a little bit more tuned in. So let's listen, to what's going on.
Certainly. And so let me just share with you, I promised on social media that I would share kind of my own personal experience, because, I think that, this is pretty illustrative. So I was in a situation where I was part of an organization, and it was the oldest, whitest organization I'd ever been part of, which is okay. It just was. And as soon as I kind of walked in the room at one point, they kind of all flocked to me. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. This is warm. This is wonderful. They asked me to be on the board. I sat on the board and proceeded to be ignored for the next several months. I was younger than most of them. I was, Black. Female wasn't as much of not a group that wasn't represented, but I was still all three of those things for them, from their perspective. And so as I made suggestions, they just, acted like I didn't say anything, or other people would, make some suggestions and I would kind of disagree with that. And I'm not saying that I think that everyone should have acquiesced to me. Certainly that's not necessarily what was going on, but let me just, give you a feel for some of the types of things. They had a history of having events at times that, for me, I was like the only person, I believe, that had young children. And so they would suggest times, either like having a conference during spring break or having calls during carpool pickup. And I would just say, hey, casually, this is kind of the exact same time as carpool, or, this is kind of during spring break. We might want to think about, doing that at a different time. And I'm not saying, again, they had to agree with what I said. And those were small things. There were some things that were larger, but I'm not necessarily going to get into those. that just summarily, absolutely ignored. So I became frustrated. I started reaching out to, there were very few Black people in the organization, I started reaching out to a couple other Black people. Then I got the tea. I found out that I was not the only one. They had basically cycled through the other Black people in the organization and burnt bridges with them. So they were through with them. So it's like when I showed up, that's why I think they were so happy to see me. I was like a fresh, Black person that they could try. But they had basically burned the bridges with the other Black people. So now they're in a worse position than they would have been had they never even asked me to participate on the board. Because think about it, if you've got 5% Black people in your organization, let's say it's 100 people, 5 are Black. If you burn bridges with those 3 Black people, now you're down to 2 Black people. And guess what? The 2 Black people aren't idiots. They've seen what's happened with the other Black people. And occasionally we do talk. So we've compared notes. And trust me, I've talked to people in those organizations that I'm through with them. I'm done. I see how they are and I'm tired of it. That's just one example of what we're talking about when we talk about the dangers of corporate tokenism.
Yeah.
Karen, your thoughts?
I mean, it's pretty much there. I think we have fortunately, it's been about a year now since the conversation has become more open, where a lot of people who were not really discussing race, not really, I'll say, they chose to be, a lot of people choose to be unaware because it's easier. And I think the main thing that we need to focus on is what's the process, what's the progress. Everything is a starting point. And you have to be able to, okay, if you hire this person, are you putting them in a position to hire more people, or at least be a part of the process of making sure that more viable candidates are being seen? I use Saturday Night Live. I'll say that. I've always wanted to be on Saturday Night Live and everything. Saturday Night Live has been on close to 50 years, not 50, but close to it. I think about 47 or whatever. They got their first Asian cast member in Bowen Yang, who's also gay,
Wow.
3 years ago.
Wow.
And then they went through that whole segment where they didn't have any Black women
right
on the show. But even for me, I'm like, okay, Black women are being left out, but what about the Latin women? What about the, I'm always looking at the total picture. And so I'll be checking Black people when Black people get caught up. They don't have no Black. I'm like, I have never seen an Asian person on the show, or I've never seen this. And it's upon all of us to look and open our eyes and see. And when we see things that are not reflecting life as it is, and are not reflecting, not giving everybody opportunity, we all have the responsibility to speak up.
Right. See something, say something.
Yeah, there's been too many Black people who have spoken up and have been beat down, or have been ignored, or have been ridiculed or invalidated. Right. And there's too many white people that watch this go down and let it happen. So what we need you to do is, in the moment, in the place, speak up. Outside of the moment, we need you to actively look how you can help this project. Do you have to do everything? No. Do you have to recreate the wheel? No. Do you have to be always on something and post? No. There are small things that you could do to speak up and say something, and you don't have to post it on the Instagram. You don't have to do all this stuff. You just have to make sure that people who are normally marginalized feel supported and are supported publicly.
Right. Yeah, and please share your experiences in the comments, because I know, this just happens all the time. I'm trying to type this out.
And on the flip side, if you are that token, because I've been in lots of situations where I'm the only Black person, I'm the only woman, and I know that that's why they hired me. So guess who is going to go through there and bogart? This is why I'm broken for corporate work, though. Like, I'm not a good corporate employee because I'm out of house. But if you are in there and you're in that position, go out of your way to make sure you're heard, or to make sure, and yes, you may burn a bridge. That's why I don't work corporate. But, you have to be that person that's trying hard to bring up that next gen,
right?
Bring up that next person and bring, reach down, reach out, reach back. to bring the next person on, so you're not alone.
Yeah, support is absolutely critical. What's also critical is to move away from just promoting or elevating like one person or maybe two people. There's been data that's shown, particularly looking at women moving to boards, that it really takes three. Because, you know, first, when you're by yourself, I mean, obviously you're intimidated, you don't necessarily have the support. It becomes just a really, really heavy lift for you to make a significant difference if you're the only in a particular organization. But the more people that you have to ally with, the more effective your voice, your collective voice certainly can be. So that's really, really important. We got to get away from this mentality of, well, we got Dana, you know, I mean, as if that's done. And again, just having that person physically there doesn't change the underlying environment, the underlying culture that allowed you to get to a point where you had no Black people. So you've got to get under the layers. You got to peel back the layers of the onion and figure out, well, how did we get here? What caused this? It's like, you know, there are huge potholes in the street and we just keep fixing the cars, but we don't fix the potholes. You know, you got to get to the point where you're like, well, what is causing this? Instead of fixing this car and this car, let's figure out what's going on in the street. You know, let's fix that.
Yeah. And it's really is a type of thing where you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what you want. And are your actions backing up what you say you want out of a situation, out of a vision? You know what I mean? You got
it's not about lip service, it's about action. And that's actually an article that I'm working on, which is about, you know, this is why we don't want to hear your racial resume. Yeah. It's like, I think that white people don't understand how off-putting it is when for Black people. Yeah, that when you spend so much energy just trying to verbally prove to me, convince me, because you got the Black needs, because your daughter has a Black friend, because, you know, you insisted on, having half Black people at the party, you know, all that stuff is great. But really, that's just to make you feel better about yourself. Yeah. If you are really doing the work, then do the work. You know, the work speaks for itself. You don't have to tell me. I'm not grading you.
Yeah. The other thing is that, again, we're not a monolith. So if we happen to have two Black people, let's not assume that, they'll be best friends. Although we probably will talk about folks behind your back in the office. But, you know, we'd be like, girl, no. But we'll do that in private if we get along. But it's really important to make sure that inclusion, it also includes able-bodied people or people of different abilities. And we can't put barriers on people based on what we think we know about people. You know what I mean? That's another thing with corporate tokenism and why people don't have voices. Well, they probably don't know about this, so I'm not going to bring it up to them. Well, they're probably not going to be able to do that because of this. They're probably not going to be able to whatever. So that's another way of barring them from being fully included in the process, is assuming that someone doesn't know, can't be able to do it, won't be able to produce. And when we just hire people based on check marks and not abilities and what people can do, we tend to like to focus our actions on what they can't do. And so the main thing is that everybody needs to be, you know, and we always hear white people be like, everybody needs to be hired on their abilities and blah, blah, blah. And we need to know that plenty of white men have been hired who were not qualified only because they were white men and they seemed like they should be in charge, or they
because
like
there is so much privilege.
Right. But well, he's just really, really confident, but he's dumb. Right. You know, I mean, it's just, you need to make sure that we're talking about abilities, we're talking about qualifications, and if someone has the qualifications, they should be hired. And if they're hired, they should be treated to the same opportunities and inclusionary measures as everyone else, and to be heard and valued.
And let me just close off in a way where we started. If you're bringing in people who don't look like you, different people from, you know, a range of areas or elements of identity, be prepared for some new ideas. It's so infuriating when you say you want diversity, but then you want to keep doing things exactly the way you've done them. So let's embrace diversity of thought. When those people come in, and this was also part of my experience where I had new ideas. I had ideas about doing things in a way that I think felt radically different for them. But in my mind, radically different was good. Okay, so also let's step back and stop thinking that just because it's a radically different idea or it's completely different from the way that we've done things in the past, that we can't do it. Maybe that's exactly what needs to be done. Let's be open to that.
Yes. Okay? That happens so much with age. You know what I mean? With age.
Right. With young people.
New kids, they know what's going on. And we're still talking about put it in the paper. Nobody reads a paper anymore.
Right.
You know?
And again, it's like we say we want this new blood and want young people, but then as soon as they bring up something that for us makes me feel uncomfortable, for us feels uncomfortable, we want to run away from it. And that to me was just crazy, because my point and why I actually resigned from the board, I'm like, well, there's no purpose in me being here. There's no purpose in me being here if you guys are just going to continue doing what you've been doing, how you've been doing it, then just have at it. Then I'm just here to help you check a box, and I'm not comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. And then I, of course, found out I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Right. But with that, we're going to have to run. I really want to thank everyone. Please let me know what topics you're interested in. I want to talk about things that are on your mind. Let me know in the comments right now, or send me a message on LinkedIn. I promise I read all my LinkedIn messages. And please check out my new course on LinkedIn. It is Supporting Allyship and Anti-Racism at Work. Let me know what you think about the course. And also let me know what questions you have from the course, because going forward in the next couple months, I'm going to carve out a couple of these LinkedIn learning or LinkedIn Live sessions to answer your questions. So after you participate in the course, send me your questions, and I want to answer your questions during these LinkedIn Lives. So thank you to my girl, Karen. Everybody tell Karen, thank you. And goodbye, and we hopefully will see her again. And you guys stay safe. Bye-bye.